In the autumn of 1533, church bells rang across England to celebrate the birth of a royal child. The infant was Elizabeth Tudor, daughter of King Henry VIII and his second wife, Anne Boleyn. The celebrations, however, concealed a profound disappointment. The king had hoped for a son. For years, Henry VIII had sought to secure the future of the Tudor dynasty. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon had produced only one surviving child, the Princess Mary. Desperate for a male heir, Henry had broken with the authority of the Pope, separated England from the Roman Catholic Church, and married Anne Boleyn. The political and religious upheaval that transformed England had been undertaken largely for one purpose: the birth of a prince. Instead, on September 7, 1533, a daughter entered the world. No one present could have imagined that this child would one day become one of England's most celebrated monarchs. Elizabeth's earliest years unfolded within a court consumed by uncertainty. Her father was among the most powerful rulers in Europe, yet his kingdom stood at the center of a religious revolution. Henry's rejection of papal authority had shocked Catholic Europe. Powerful monarchs, church leaders, and foreign diplomats watched England closely, wondering whether the king's bold experiment would survive. At the center of these tensions stood Anne Boleyn. Intelligent, ambitious, and controversial, Anne possessed many admirers but even more enemies. Some regarded her as the architect of England's break with Rome. Others blamed her for displacing Catherine of Aragon and humiliating Princess Mary. As a result, Elizabeth's future depended almost entirely on her mother's position. If Anne produced a son, Elizabeth would likely remain an important princess. If Anne failed, both mother and daughter could lose everything. By 1536, the situation had become dangerous. Anne had suffered miscarriages and still had not provided Henry with the long-awaited male heir. The king's attention shifted toward another woman, Jane Seymour. Political enemies gathered around Anne, sensing weakness. Then came the catastrophe. In May 1536, Anne Boleyn was arrested and accused of adultery, treason, and incest. Historians continue to debate the validity of the charges, but many believe they were fabricated or exaggerated to eliminate her. After a swift trial, Anne was condemned to death. On May 19, 1536, she was executed within the walls of the Tower of London. Elizabeth was not yet 3 years old. She would have no memory of the event itself, but its consequences would shape her entire life. Almost overnight, she ceased to be the cherished daughter of the king and became the child of a disgraced queen. Parliament declared her illegitimate. Her status as princess was removed. Servants were dismissed. Household arrangements changed. The royal child who had once stood near the center of power suddenly found herself pushed to the margins. Yet Elizabeth's misfortune also became an education. The court into which she grew was a place where fortunes rose and fell with terrifying speed. One queen had been executed. Another would die shortly after childbirth. Others would be divorced or discarded. From an early age, Elizabeth learned that survival depended upon caution, self-control, and the ability to read people's intentions. These lessons would later become central to her political success. Fortunately, despite her altered status, Elizabeth did not grow up neglected. Henry VIII remained interested in her welfare. She received excellent tutors and enjoyed an education far superior to that available to most women of the 16th century. The Renaissance was transforming European intellectual life, and Elizabeth benefited from some of the finest humanist scholars in England. Among the most influential was Roger Ascham, one of the leading educators of his age. Under the guidance of her tutors, Elizabeth developed an extraordinary appetite for learning. She studied Latin, Greek, French, and Italian. She learned rhetoric, philosophy, theology, history, and classical literature. Visitors frequently remarked upon her intelligence and discipline. While many noble children viewed study as an obligation, Elizabeth approached it with enthusiasm. Hours spent with books became both an intellectual pursuit and a refuge from the uncertainties of court life. Her education distinguished her from many contemporary rulers. She learned not merely how to read, but how to think critically, analyze arguments, and communicate with precision. These abilities later enabled her to dominate political discussions and diplomatic negotiations. Meanwhile, her family life remained complicated. After Anne Boleyn's death, Henry VIII married several more times. Some stepmothers treated Elizabeth kindly. Most notable among them was Catherine Parr, Henry's sixth and final wife. Catherine was educated, deeply interested in religion, and committed to learning. She helped reunite Henry with both Mary and Elizabeth, improving relationships within the royal family. Under Catherine's influence, Elizabeth experienced one of the happiest periods of her youth. Yet even these years were not free from danger. The Tudor court remained a place of intrigue and ambition. Powerful nobles competed for influence. Religious divisions deepened as Protestant reformers and Catholic traditionalists struggled for dominance. Every political change carried consequences for members of the royal family. Elizabeth therefore matured in an environment unlike that experienced by most children. She learned that public appearances could conceal private rivalries. She learned that affection and loyalty could shift suddenly. Most importantly, she learned that words mattered. A careless statement could destroy a reputation or even cost a life. By her teenage years, Elizabeth had become remarkably self-controlled. Observers noted her intelligence, dignity, and composure. She possessed a sharp memory and an ability to remain calm under pressure. Although still young, she had already witnessed events that would have overwhelmed many adults. She had lost her mother to execution. She had been declared illegitimate. She had watched political factions struggle for power. She had lived through religious upheaval that divided an entire nation. These experiences forged qualities that later defined her reign. The future queen who would outmaneuver foreign ambassadors, withstand rebellions, and confront the Spanish Armada was not created suddenly upon her accession to the throne.